I started rereading the Dietz and Ostrom et al. Paper. That's a great paper. It's almost as if you could do that one paper to understand the whole course, and then you can just stop listening to me. But hopefully you'll enjoy that. Coase, like Hayek in a way, will take a long time to make his point. But that's one of the two papers for which he won the Nobel Prize. So he does have a message in there that's quite useful. It will help you, of course, for doing your homeworks, and more importantly, it'll help you with your briefing. It'll help you in life. Any questions about anything? Open questions? Okay, last time we were, I stopped with crony capitalism, which means the use of the state for private benefit. It happens in lots of countries. Everything from having your friend write the rules, regulating the business practices, to having licenses sold at a discount to insiders and so on. There's many, many examples. I'm sure you could fill in those examples. But let's talk a little bit here get a little bit into some of the dynamics of group interactions, group activities, and it has to do with not a marketplace where you go in and you pay a couple of dollars and you buy a cup of coffee, but in which is a competitive situation where you make a transaction with somebody. But let's talk more about a social grouping where people work together on an informal basis without necessarily being able to leave each other. You're kind of stuck with each other, as if the doors of this room locked, and then we had to work with each other to solve whatever problem it would be. We don't get to leave the room. We don't have exit, and we also don't have the opportunity to import ideas, so we have to work with each other. Those essentially are how almost all social dynamics work, whether those social dynamics be within a classroom, within your family, within your shared housing, or within your local community or your country. Politics, in fact, is more or less us trying to get along with each other without being able to leave. And so a lot of people who do actually migrate around the world permanently, they leave from one system to another, they tend to do that because they don't like the politics or they don't like the outcomes of the politics, and they go to another country where they feel they have a better shot. Usually, a lot of migrants just want to be left alone. But sometimes they'll go to a place where they feel like, wow, the health system works here, or the cops are not crooked here, or I will be able to get an education and get a job instead of having to be rich to get a job here. Those kinds of issues come up with politics. And today we're going to continue to work on, or we're going to get a little deeper into politics, markets, and society, which are all these things and how they interact more importantly. Because when it comes to resources where you have something that's economically valuable that is allocated by the state, then you need to think about not just the market, which is fairly straightforward. You have to think about the state and the process by which the state manages resources on behalf of its citizens. This is the tricky part. If I am managing for you, I am representing you, then I have a problem identified by a guy who wrote a paper, and his name was who? What was his name? I need to aggregate information from many of you. What was his name of the guy who said this? Remember that paper that all of you read? Hayek. How many people have read Hayek now? How many people still have not read Hayek? The people who have not raised your hands, I'll think of you as not having read Hayek either. Remember that it's very difficult to catch up with 30-plus hours of lecture on video, those of you who are at home watching this. It's very difficult to read Hayek and Coase and so on before the midterm. I guarantee that cramming will not help. So if you're having trouble keeping up with the work and you are making an effort, come and see me. I'm very interested in helping you. If you are having trouble keeping up with the work because you're not doing the work, don't come and see me. I'll be interested to see your test grades, but honestly, why are you here, right? That's the end of my little situation. But what did Hayek say? Hayek said, someone who read Hayek, raise your hands again. Raise your hands again who read Hayek. Yes, in the back there with the black jacket looking down. What did Hayek say about how I should be able to get information from you? Is it easy for me to do? Why is it not easy for me to understand what all of you guys want? Sorry? Everybody has different desires. Okay, but all of the information, so desires, we can call those like your utility function or your preferences or whatever, but collecting all that information, what all that information? What about all that information? Is there one piece of information I need to collect from all of you? What do I collect from all of you? You don't know? Who else read it? You guys always raise your hands. Who else read it over here? So nobody over here read the Hayek thing? You guys didn't read it? Did you read it? Did you read it? You read it. You're already in the back. Hold on. People in the middle here. Remember when I said last week, did you do the reading? And you said no, and I said you should do your reading. Then what happened? What did you do? Did you not read, or do you intend to read that paper? Sorry? The paper written by Hayek. Have you heard of that? You did read it. Didn't? I didn't hear you. You didn't finish reading it. You started it. What did he say at the start of the paper that you started reading about information? About the difference between your information and his information and her information. What did he say at the start of the paper? Do you remember? You didn't read it. You did read it. You did. Yes, I didn't read it. That's good. That's very good. Direct. Did you read it? What did he say? You don't remember? Okay, guy in the back. I pointed way past you. What did he say about information?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure.
Give me your best guess. He said two things in this paper. I realized there were 10 whole pages, but there were two things in those 10 whole pages.
People don't always know like other people's preferences.
Not just preferences. That's what he just said here. That's back to preferences. Okay, who has another guess? In the back, you two. Your team. What did he say? You can consult with each other. Preferences, that's good. That has been said. We know that now, preferences. He doesn't know. What did he say? Costs of what? Yes, this is very important. He said, this is not what I'm asking, but this is very important. He said that the price, you don't have to be an expert, you don't have to know everything. In fact, I'm going to back out the answer from what you just said. I don't need to know what you know. What you know is different from your preferences. There's two things here. Your preferences, everybody kind of agrees about preferences. I know that you like white t-shirts more than you like, and you like gray sweaters, right? I see a revealed preference. But it's not just the preferences, it's also just plain old information. Who here, you walk out of the toilet, there's no toilet paper. Do you tell the person that's coming in after you, oh, by the way, no toilet paper? Or you leave it for them to find out? Right? Asymmetric information. And so, you don't just have preferences as a human being, you have information also just as a sentient being, as somebody who thinks and can see and can record. So, yes, we all have different preferences, and sorry, what is the thing that we also don't have? What else do we have that's unique to us besides preferences? This is called what I just said. You need to summarize it and tell me what I just said. Okay, so that means that I have different information from who? Everybody. Everybody has different information, right? Okay. So he talks about the fact that we have different preferences, which everybody knows in economics. But he said, wait a second, information is also different, asymmetric, among people. And then we need to find a way of aggregating it into a price. Okay? This ends up being very complicated. This is what economies do. And what I'm getting at here, I'm not just wasting your time. What I'm getting at is that what societies need to do is the same thing. If the marketplace has prices, then politics has what? It's not in the paper. You have to think out of the box, in the room. If markets have prices, then politics has what? What? Property rights, no. What does it have? You're trying to think? No, almost. What? What? Restriction? No. Those are all things those are kind of true. I'm looking at getting an analogy here. If I'm in a marketplace and there are price signals flying around, it helps me allocate resources. And I'm not going to be in a marketplace. I'm going to be in a political forum where there's people in BC and they're in Victoria and they're in Ottawa and they're in Washington and they're in Beijing. And there's these signals flying around. It's not called Twitter. Votes. Right? The whole point of voting in one way or another is that people can express their opinions, and the people who are counting the votes can say, I'm going to aggregate these opinions and find out if there is in favor of doing a new bridge or not doing a new bridge. Voting is information. This is why voting is very useful, because it passes along to people who are supposed to be in charge of policies and programs information from the citizens. It is a bottom-up transmission of information that will help those politicians do their job. Now, of course, some politicians don't care about what people think. They don't like voting. This is not, it's not just a problem for information theory, it's a problem for that society, because the people who are in charge are more interested in their own ideas of how to do things than they are interested in the citizens' ideas. This happens in many, many countries, in the US as well as other countries that are called democracies. So that is the point of information flows. It is very hard to aggregate information. We have votes and we have markets and prices because we're trying to get to a better set of policies or a better set of outcomes. That's just the topic. That's the overview of what we're talking about. And what I'm trying to do here is bring in the dynamics of a marketplace where you have and society. Okay, so in a market, we have many people who are going to make voluntary interactions with each other, let's say. Okay? If I want to deal with this person, I will. A deals with B and B deals with C if they feel like it or whatever. In a society, you've got A, B, and C, but they're all stuck in it together, and D is in charge, let's say, as their leader. So if A and B want to make a deal in a marketplace, they make a deal. They buy a pair of shoes, they rent an apartment, they sell a sandwich. It doesn't matter, okay? And if A doesn't like B's sandwich, then E goes to C. You've got competition, okay? But in society where you have a social problem, you might have, are we going to have drive on the left side of the road or drive on the right side of the road, okay? You could have competition where cars are heading on to each other face on, and whoever doesn't die gets to make the road rules. On the other hand, societies tend to get a little bit more civilized, and they say, hey, let's all vote left or right, but once we decide left side of the road or right side of the road, let's just stick with it, okay? Don't drive on the wrong side of the road. And of course, the joke is that countries have, if you go from Canada to Japan or whatever, they're on the wrong side of the road. But Japan comes from Canada, they're like, you're on the wrong side of the road. But it doesn't matter, as long as you're on one side of the road, okay? That's what politics is about. Not necessarily that 100% of people get what they want. When you go to lunch today, I guarantee you're going to get what you want, because that's a market. But in politics, you're going to go to lunch today, and the opening hours are going to be set, or there's going to be, in politics, you're going to have a road. You don't get to have what you want on the road. You're going to drive on the right side of the road, okay? So these guys are all stuck together, and they're hoping Mr. D takes care of them. That's the issue. That's what we're interested in with politics. And the problem could be, quite often, that what if these guys all want Project C, let's just say. Okay, there's a thing called Project C, and there's another thing called Project A. How do these people transmit their idea to D? They can be on Twitter, they can have blogs. D can ask them to vote. They put their anonymous ballots in the ballot box, and D says, and Mr. D comes up and says, oh yeah, it's Project A. Good job, you guys all chose A. And it's like, wait a second. I don't know if I chose, I didn't choose A, my friends didn't choose A, how do we get A? And you literally don't know because you have information that's going up the stack from the little people up to D, and you don't know what happens in the middle in terms of the information. It's a challenge, is what I'm going to get at here. It's a challenge to know what's going on. A society that has a well-functioning information marketplace, and I'm using the word market, but I'm talking about information. A society where people can learn from each other and talk to each other and exchange ideas is a society where the flow of information from the bottom to the top is going to be more accurate, and the citizens are going to get what they want. And what they want is what works for the majority, right? In most cases, 51%. They don't want what works for the friend of the guy in charge. So they don't want crony capitalism. You want to have a society where everybody is more or less fair with each other. I won't go into long parts of political theory, but basically the idea with politics is that you want to be treated fairly and you're willing to treat everybody else fairly. That is what every religion around the world has said. It's called the Golden Rule. It's the same thing with politics. And the problem is that many societies suffer from a failure to deliver on that rule because the people who are rich want to get richer and the people who are powerful want to keep their power or get richer. And so the citizens are not necessarily served. This is not meant to be an editorial. This is what happens with resources, right? This is where resource mismanagement goes wrong. You can have a beautiful model of resource dynamics. We're going to have a guest lecture next week from a fisheries scientist. He can give you a beautiful model, but it turns out not just that we don't know the information in the model, but the guy who has the model might not even care about maximizing social benefits. He might care about taking the fish before you take them, or giving the license to his cousin. So where we fall down in terms of managing resources is not science, it's humans. And human greed and human corruption and so on. And that's what you need to be sensitive about when you're doing this work. When you're doing your briefing, you can't just say, I'm going to write an optimal oil transmission equation, and it's going to move money from part A to part B. I'll distribute all the revenues, one per person. You have to tell me, how is that going to work? Is it going to work in practice? In fact, you don't tell me, of course, you're telling each other, right? Is that what you're reading those briefings, are they going to be practicable, implementable in terms of practicable? Just a reminder, remember, homework 2 is due, start a class on Thursday. Which is totally off topic, but while we're talking about things. So here's there's an expression called collective action. And when we talk about collective actions, we have to worry about free riders. So let's say that you've got these folks who all want Project C, and this person wants Project A. And they all know that it's a 3-to-1 or a 300 to 100, whatever. There's a majority in favor of Project C. But Project A is, for example, a subsidy for people who are taller than 1 meter 90. Who here is taller than 1 meter 90? If you don't know that, it's like 6 feet or taller. 6 feet or taller. Here's our special interest group right here. The 6-footers, they want a law that says that all 6 foot or 1 meter 85, whatever the number is, 1 meter, if you're taller than that, you're going to get paid an extra $10 a day. But don't worry, it's not going to cost you guys anything. You only have to pay $1. If you're short, you're going to pay a $1 tax. I'm sorry, but this is the way our society runs. okay? And I am the leader of the height subsidy movement, and I am willing to collect the money from you. Well, you're pretty tall. Are you up there? Are you going to make some money here? Okay, he's going to make some money, but you're going to pay money. So I'm going to use my power as the government to take your money, sorry. All you non-basketball players, I'm taking all your money. I'm keeping a little bit of money for myself because of administrative costs. And then if you're tall, you're going to get your $10. Now, these tall guys are known as what in politics? Who are the tall guys suddenly, out of nowhere? What are they called, the tall guys in politics? Free riders. Close. That's on the board. But that's not what I'm asking. What are they called in the back? All three of you. That's right. I'll start with you in the far back left. Go ahead. What are they called? These mostly gentlemen. Any 6-foot women here? Tall women? No? The boys of subsidy. What are they called? What are they called? Good. That's the definition. What's the title? Do you in your country, do you have some people that get favors from the government? Some special friends of the government? Have you heard of this? Special friends? Special friends, special interests. Right? It's just a jargon, special interests, but they're basically special friends, right? So the special interests that's just a phrase. That's a term. Special interests. The tall people are special interests. The corn farmers are special interests. The solar panel industry is a special interest. All that means in terms of special interests is that this group, which is a minority, is going to get benefits transferred from the majority. That's what it means, a special interest. And you cannot be, if you're in the majority, you don't get to join the minority here. You cannot shrink in, well, maybe you could, get surgery or whatever, but it's difficult to become a member of the special interest, which is one of the reasons that they're called that as a definition. So they're going to go to their friend, Mr. D, and say, hey, look, if you tax all these people $1 each, you can keep 20 cents because administrative costs. So I'm going to buy a villa in Hawaii so I can have a little beachfront property with the tax money that you guys pay, and then I'm going to give the rest of the money to these guys, and then they're going to be my best friends. Right? Now, the rest of you are kind of in trouble. You're a little bit screwed up. But what is it now? Look, there's only 5 or 6 of these guys that are tall. I mean, maybe one of them can be difficult in a fight with one or two of you, but there's like at least 5 of you for every one of these guys. What would you do if I came to you and I said, I'm taking your money? I'm taking your money, and I'm giving. What would you do? Tell me, what would you do? You say, here, please, thank you. Have some more money? Yo, yes, please, I like giving you money. What would you do? No, you're getting money, you're making money, you're happy. You kick him out of society. Now, you are a little kicker out of society person. Can you kick him out of society? Or do you need help? Help. Who's going to help her? Everyone else. Are you sure everyone is going to help? Some of the people might just wait and see what happens to you. Right? Oh, she's brave. Let's see what happens. But she's paying the same tax you are. She's just as damaged as you are. Why is it that you're going to wait for her to go? In fact, if you're going to wait for her to go, why doesn't she wait for you to go first? No, you go first. You take on the tall guys lobby. Free riders, right? So you are boldly marching ahead, looking behind your shoulder, hoping that someone, George Bush had a word for this. He called it the coalition of the willing. Right? I'm going to invade Iraq, says George Bush. Anybody want to come with me? And no one's coming. Shit, no one's going to invade Iraq with me. So he makes a coalition of the willing because he gives a bunch of money to Mauritius and all these little teeny islands. It's a 17-nation invasion of Iraq, right? 95% Americans and 5% like the willing who are like, oh my God, I don't want to be here, right? But they got paid a bunch of bribes from the U.S. government. So the problem is not that a special interest wants to steal your money. The problem is, how do you organize for collective action to take on the special interest? Because you've got your own problem. So there's a problem within a problem. The first problem is this little group is out there taking your money. The second problem is that you can't get a group of people in your big group to all agree to go and take on the special interest which is taking your money. That's what is the center of the free rider problem. That is the center of a collective action problem. They're very similar ideas. And that's what happens when you get a political situation that's not working for the majority, right? And there's hundreds of examples in every country. It's remarkable. But anytime you want to talk about a social failure or a waste of resources or any of those things, you want to talk about these kinds of collective action. Now, there's a very famous book, which is quite good, written a long time ago, and it talks about your options when you are faced with this dilemma as citizens. One option is you leave. You know what? I'm leaving this room. I don't want to deal with the tall guy lobby. I'm going to go find some short people, right? Exit. Voice. I'm going to complain. I'm going to be on Twitter. Oh my God, the tall guys are getting all the money. We shouldn't have that happen. Let's have a hashtag short revolution, right? We're going to have a revolution. But that actually worked, right? In Tunisia. One of the revolutions of the Arab Revolution, the Arab Spring, that worked is a bunch of people started text messaging each other, and as soon as 10,000 people show up, now you have got a sizable number of people behind you. 10,000 people against a couple tall guys, now we're talking, right? The dictator of Tunisia, after 30 years in power and his family being corrupt and his wife stealing gold and so on, left on an airplane. You can have the country, I'm done with it. Right? That was a considerable success in terms of collective action. Other countries in the Middle East had variations on these kinds of themes. They were coordinated. Why did the government shut down the internet and shut down mobile phone communication? They're trying to stop all the short guys from working together to try and overthrow the bad guys, the minority, that were stealing all their money after years and years and years, right? This is why, of course, China has the Great Wall, the Great Firewall of China, right? To block information contact with the outside world. That is why a lot of internet services are curated in China. There's other things than Facebook and Twitter. There's all these the microblogs, they call them, or whatever. But now, guess what? Chinese people, just like anybody else, they want to complain, right? If you say, so-and-so, the name of a leader is my hero, and then they start to censor that, and then you say, hey, my shoe is my hero, right? You have some new word, which is because the characters look the same or whatever. I don't know how this works. But everybody realizes there's a word out there that is a euphemism. It is a substitute word for what we want to talk about. One of my favorite examples was in the Soviet Union, where they said, you're not allowed to sell cars. For sale sign is totally illegal. You'll get arrested, you'll go to jail. So what people would do is they would put it wasn't a cup of coffee, they put a milk jar on top of their car. Milk jars on top of your car, are those legal? Well, they didn't know. But everybody knew after a little while, that milk jars mean the car's for sale. So you sit there and say, oh, nice milk jar you got there. Can I buy it for $4,000? And you throw in the car for free, right? So people will find a way to work together even though the government wants to censor them. That's interesting, because that is what this is all about. This is trying to get what you want. And the authorities are not cooperating with you. In the United States, they have Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party as political movements of the little people, so to speak, who were upset about crony capitalism in the United States. Why did the U.S. government give billions of dollars to banks? Those groups were very upset. And then they turned into like kind of ridiculous political theater, which is actually a little bit, was not necessarily an accident. Because some people don't want those debates in the U.S. just like they don't want them in other countries. So you need to find ways of coordinating. Information makes it easier to coordinate, and the Tunisian government, or the Tunisian people, are much happier today. The Egyptian people are in difficult condition because the military has taken over again. Right? It's a counter-revolution. So it's not easy to make yourself better off, your life better off, but what you're trying to do is get the collective to work together. And the people who are in Ukraine right now protesting, they're getting shot dead. You go to class, you don't think like, oh my God, it's like I didn't do the reading. You don't think about getting shot dead, right? But those people are saying, and the person who's in front, usually young guys, because young guys are like, fuck it, I'm just going to go for it, right? Because they're tired of it. The guy in Tunisia, he burned himself to death because he was tired of paying bribes to the police. He's dead. He's got a statue, but he was a hero, basically, to his own people. And the people in Ukraine are the same thing. They are the ones, the minority, they're like you, running out and like, you guys come along, I'm going to go. And she got, or not you, they get shot. But bullets will not stop a good idea, right? That's like a movie poster, but it's true, right? These revolutions do happen because people take chances because they're so tired of it. And that is the problem with these dynamics. If you just think, oh, well, in terms of my cost-benefit, I could end up shot, which is bad. And the benefit is I have 1/1,000,000th of the benefits of having a free society. Maybe I won't do that. Thank God for irrational people running in front, because we wouldn't have any revolutions if it was all economists. They'd be all sitting there doing their calculators, you know? So that's the dynamics of the collective action. And the collective action is the dynamic of politics. This is about the political economy of natural resources. So when it comes down to people protesting the pipeline, or there are people who are they're riding their bikes to across the country because they don't want to take a car, and you're driving past them going, oh, that guy's an idiot, right? But how are you ever going to have change except for a couple leaders in the front? And apparently those people will get some people to change, and some more people will change, and some more people will change until everybody has changed, right? That's the thing with these bottles of water, right? That 10 years ago, no one carried bottles of water around with them. They had water fountains that are like 10 meters outside. It's like emergency hydration mission, right? You have to have the water right there. And now it's become this trend to have bottles of water because people have to be hydrated. And then like in 20 years, it'll be something else. People will have like, ears or something like that. So the thing is, it's not just fashions, but it's also we adapt ideas through a gradual diffusion across society. So another word for this in terms of economics, the jargon for this in terms of economics, is called, let's do it here. We've got the principal and the agent. If you have a car and and the car is making a noise, you go to the garage and you say to the mechanic, hey, I've got a car. Can you take care of this for me? I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But why don't you charge me $50 or $100 an hour to look into it? And what you tell me it is, I'll trust you that you'll repair the car and do the right thing and charge me the minimum amount of money to get the repair done. Does this ring any alarm bells in your head? Do you have a car? When you take it to the mechanic and you say, something's wrong, I have a lot of money, help me out, what does he say? Are you worried or are you happy about this mechanic? You don't say anything. They don't say anything. But do you worry about the situation? Like he knows about what's wrong with the car, but you don't? And what do you do to reduce your worry, to worry less? What do you do when you're looking for a mechanic or you're going to the mechanic and you want to worry less? Get a second opinion. Huh? Second opinion? A nice store? So they have a reputation, right? So there's a reputation called a nice flashy sign. Another one is, yeah, I think you were telling me my transmission doesn't work, but I'm going to drive it out of here and go find another mechanic, which takes time and effort, but it is a second opinion. Very valuable. Or you ask your friends, right? Hey, where do you go for a mechanic? Where do you go for the dentist? Where do you go to get your hair done? Where do you take your kids for Daycare, right? Where did you go to dinner? What do? We use reputation, we use information, we ask each other questions to overcome an asymmetric information problem, which is the agent knows something and we don't, right? We're the principal, they're the agent. They're working on our behalf. If you have a good agent, they can really help you a lot. They can fix your car for a lot less money and time than you would ever take, right? But if they don't want to help you and they kind of, snip a few wires and, oh my God, I'm sorry, your whole engine is destroyed. It's $4,500. We just happen to have an engine in back, right? Sometimes they take out something out of your car, say it's missing, and then charge you to put it back in the car that was already there. Right? That's not the kind of person you want. Those are the mechanics and the doctors and whoever and the people who are taking care of your children that you don't want. So you've got this principal-agent relationship. What's the parallel between principal-agent relationship that I just defined here and the political relationship? What's the parallel? Who's the politician in the principal-agent relationship? Is the politician the principal or the agent? The agent. I'm going to do call and respond. Who is the politician, the principal or the agent? Wrong. All of you. Wow. You don't listen to him all the time, do you? What did I hold? Agent. What did you say? Agent or principal? Agent. You're all right. I'm wrong. I'm not even listening. No, the politician is the agent. God, I'm an idiot. Okay, so this is the politician. I thought you're like, damn, this is hard. No, actually, it's not that hard. The politician is the agent. He knows more, right? Besides the whole power problem. He knows more, right? He's listening to all these guys saying, oh, they're all saying Project C. I have all these ballots come in from the election. It's not looking good for us. Let's just lose a few boxes of ballots, right, of votes. So the voters are the principals. Or citizens, or whatever you want to call it, right? Now, here's the thing that makes it complicated. What happens when you put someone else in between? It's not like I sit there and I go home, I'm an American, right? So I don't go home and say, yo, Barack, I'm your citizen. I'm your principal. Let me tell you, you're my agent. I don't talk to Barack directly. I got to go through a bunch of middlemen, right? So what I've got, more or less, in any kind of complex system, besides you and your parents, mom, right? You have to go through a couple people in the middle. So you have to say, hey, I'm going to use this. I use this example all the time because it's water. The water manager is the water manager is right here, and what the water manager does is make sure the water I drink is clean and safe. I don't know if it's clean or safe. I have to trust the water manager that it's clean or safe. I actually have no feedback. It's only a one-way. Like the water's falling. It's only a one-way drop of information to me. I'm the beneficiary of the decisions of the water manager. So here's the manager. Here's me. And the manager is sending water to me. I have to trust the manager. Now, sometimes that's a good idea because the manager is a member of my community who cares deeply about doing his job well, etc. And sometimes it's bad because the manager doesn't care about me, doesn't know me, and actually, making the water safe takes extra work, and he wants to go watch the game. So what we do is we say, okay, I can't see what the manager is doing. I'm going to get a regulator who is going to work for me and watch the manager. This is one type of information structure. It's very common in the utility structure. So for telephones, electricity, heating, water, you have a regulator who is watching the utility, who is serving the citizens, the highest quality at the lowest cost. That is always the promise. Highest quality, lowest cost. That utility can do that work. That utility, without any supervision, if they want to do the good job, they can totally do a good job. They're professionals, and they have a professional pride or reputation. Over time, a reputation does develop. But sometimes, if your power is going off in one city, you're not sure, is that like because we don't have enough money to invest in the infrastructure? Or does the power go off because the guy fell asleep and knocked over his coffee on the thing and blew it up, right? So you don't necessarily know. There's asymmetric information. You don't know what that manager is doing. And so you ask the regulator to keep an eye on him. But now, guess what? You got a different problem. What's the other problem? I can't watch the manager. The regulator's watching the manager. What's my next problem? Who's watching the regulator, right? Who's watching the watchers? I'll tell you, here's the answer. There's no answer. It's really hard to figure out what to do next, right? You get another person. You can't just do this, right? You can't go one. You can't go on forever. So at some point, the system is going to work or not. But this principal-agent-beneficiary, or what's, in economics, we always talk about principal-agent dynamics, but in bureaucracies and government, it's not principal-agent just like you and the president. It's a whole bunch of middlemen, right? And no one knows what's going on. This person is simultaneously a principal and an agent because this person he knows more than this guy, so he's an agent, but he's supposed to be reporting to this guy. What am I doing? I'm getting confused. He knows more than this guy, so he's a principal. The water manager knows more than the regulator, and the regulator is our agent. We're the principal. This guy is just an agent. If you took good notes, sorry about that. Is that messy enough? Agent. So we've got the problem is exactly the same, even though I was using the wrong words. The problem is the same because I'm taking the water manager is doing a job, and he's reporting information to this guy, but this guy is he's working for me. That's the dynamic. If you want to keep it simple, it's just principal agent. The water manager knows more than the regulator. But you have to be realistic and say that the regulator is there to try and protect me from him. It gets worse. That's just 3. I'm not going to go further, but I'm just trying to illustrate this to you. If you are looking at resource or environmental management or bureaucracy or regulation, you have to look for this structure and see who knows what. Because who knows what is a very important idea that was written in a paper by a guy named Call and Response. A guy named... There's only one paper that some of you have read in this class. What's his last name? Start with. What's the letter? H. Good. Can you give me an H? Go. H. Can you give me a? A. Can you give me a? Y. Y. Come on. This is like sports. E. K. Hayek. Hayek talked about what? Information. That's this whole problem here. You guys are so excited about this. You can make so much money knowing things about information. You can make a lot of money. Money. Hello, wake up. Money. Money. If you have information, you can graduate and make money. Write that down. If only one thing, right? Information is not just money, power. There's an expression, information is power. And money is power too. I can't wait to read these briefings because they'll be very impressive with the discussion of information. Okay. Now, as one more thing before we run out of time probably. Yep. One more thing I want to talk about before with the break, and that is a variation on this society collective action problem. So we're in politics now. We're not in markets. So here, you've got the masses, and here you've got a special interest group. Special interest group number 2, and here's special interest group number 1. And special interest, and here's the politician. And special interest group number 1 wants to ban water fountains. No fountains. Because they are in the bottled water business, right? And special interest group number 2 wants to ban cups. No cups. Because they're in the these things, selling these water bottles business. They sell the bottles without water. So both of these groups have got some interest. The bottle manufacturers want to ban cups. So you have to buy a bottle. You can't have one of these things. These are totally illegal. Sorry, I'm going to seize this. These are illegal. All right? You have to have an authorized plastic thing or a metal thing sold by XYZ Bottle Corporation, right? And then the other group says, no, we want to ban fountains, so you can't fill these things up, so you have to buy bottled water. Now, here's the interest group that wants you to buy bottled water. Here's the interest group that wants you to buy the bottles. But all the rest of you really don't care. And actually, you would like to have fountains and the access to bottled water. You would like that. Okay? So we know the special interests don't represent the majority interest. And I'm the politician, let's say, at the top of the decision tree. I get to make rules. I have power. And I say, oh, I wonder what's good for society. And of course, I don't listen to you. I listen to you and to you in terms of the two lobbyists. And I say, if you give me, say, a nice lunch, I'll listen to you very carefully. So she gives me a nice lunch. And the lunch is worth, say $10, but she's looking at a lot of bottled sales around here. You could sell 100 bottles in here, because you have to have one for breakfast and one for dinner. You can't use the same bottle twice. It's part of the law, right? Obviously. And then I say to her, it's like, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about this bottled thing. Do you want to help me out here with the bottled water idea that you think is a good idea? And she's like, yeah, I'll buy you dinner. Okay. All right, now I got dinner. Can I have a glass of wine with that? Yes, of course. Another $22 for a glass of wine. Now I got $40 out of her, and I say, hey, I had a really good dinner last night with the old bottled water people. I'm not quite sure that I like this bottle thing. Can you help me out with maybe a small bicycle? 1,000 cc's BMW, they're small, like $18,000 or so. Well, looking into the bottled water profitability, which is quite high because you're taking plastic and selling 50 cents of plastic for $10. Okay, I'll look into the bottles. And she's like, oh, golly. And I say, well, you could help me out with that chalet in Switzerland that I've been looking at. 416,000 Swiss francs, that's some real money, right? La-di-da, back and forth. That's lobbying, you know that. But do I have any incentive to stop this dispute between these two? Like, there's not even anything. You guys actually don't even care, right? You're sitting there like drinking your bottled water like innocently, and there's all these laws being debated. But I'm getting lobbied by both sides, and I literally don't care who wins. In fact, I don't even want anybody to win ever, because I keep getting food and meals and Swiss chalets and motorcycles. And that's what politicians like about lobbying. They don't necessarily, number one, they want to have lobbying about something that doesn't even matter. There's no politics. There's no politics in bottles. I shouldn't even be in this job or looking at that problem, right? And number two, if I'm going to make a useless law about something that doesn't matter, I might as well keep it going for a while until all these different special interests give me as much money as possible, and then I'll say, actually, let's talk about it in 2015, right? And I go back to doing whatever, invading countries. So that is a phenomena in politics where you have two interest groups or 14 interest groups. They're all fighting with each other, right? And the politicians in the middle of it may not want to have an easy solution. Number one, they want to have power over the situation. But number two, they may not want to have an easy solution. During the break, there's a very good question that I'm going to elaborate on for all of you. Please put away the devices. Thank you. You can text message out my wisdom later, okay? There's a recording. So during the break, someone asked, well, how are we going to do these supply and demand curves for club goods and private goods and common pool goods? I will guarantee that the supply and demand curves that you're going to draw are not going to be the ones that you've seen before. It's a little bit of a thought exercise. What I recommend in terms of creating them is that you think in terms of the supply and the demand of an individual in order to figure out what a supply and demand curve would look like for a club good or a private good or a public good, and then also how you would aggregate them. This matters in terms of talking about exclusive, right? Can you exclude the good or not? So work from the individual up. Some of these graphs will look the same from the individual perspective, but they'll look different when you aggregate them. Okay? Should be quite interesting. Now, I also got an email from a student in the last class that she asked a very good question, and it essentially is about morals. In fact, can markets be moral? Is more or less the idea. The simple answer is no. Markets are not good about being moral. That's not their job. Markets are about allocating resources to people who value them more from people who value them less. I sell, you buy. There's no moral discussion going on there. Should I kill you after I sell it to you? Well, that's a different problem. That's not really a market, right? Should I rob you in terms of giving you something that is not what you asked for? So the question is, and you know that when you go to the market, there's an old expression from Latin. It's called caveat emptor. Beware the buyer, right? When you went to the market and you are going to get some bread, or so easy example, tomatoes. Sometimes you go to the market, you get some fruit, and the guy puts a couple older tomatoes on the bottom of your pile, right? The green grocer. Or you go there, you look at the expiration date on the bread. What if there's no expiration date on the bread, right? Which is what would happen without a regulation often to say so. So the information in the market is not necessarily clear, but everybody knows that going in. That's why it is beware the buyer. That's what he used to say over the entrance of the market, the agora the markets in Rome, the marketplace. So markets are not moral, but that's why we have society. That's why we have politics. We have friends and family. Because if, well, just look at our biology, right? Babies are born helpless. They cannot get up and run away at 1 day old the way that a baby horse can, right? Or a baby gazelle or something like that. Baby humans need to be carried around for a couple of years, and then they can't talk, and they're like just totally helpless, right? And that part of raising the children is why we have families to protect the baby, and why families come together to make little groups, and why in some ways we have societies. We have societies more or less because at some point we're all a baby, and we all need protection. We all need help. And so we have collective goods like security, right, or justice, and we have some other kinds of social transfers, such as paying taxes to, guess what, subsidize somebody else. That subsidy, in fact, is probably permissible. There's good subsidies and bad subsidies. The bad subsidies distort the prices of things that are in the marketplace, coffee, gasoline. Those kinds of subsidies are distorting and increasing consumption of something that may not have any social value to be consumed higher. A subsidy towards income or subsidy towards education is supposed to help by making everybody smart enough to help each other out. But the subsidy towards income or people who are unemployed or people who are unhealthy, that is a social transfer. That is the morality side. This is where we're trying to help each other out. And the point is this, is that there are some things that society and politics is good for, which is taking care of people who are sick, people who are old, people who are young, people who need help. And there are things that societies are not good at, which is making sure that I get a cup of coffee and you get a bagel, right? We don't have the prime minister of bagels out there, or the minister in charge of coffee markets. We have the minister in charge of healthcare. We have the minister in charge of in security, right? We don't have the minister in charge of what you had for lunch, unless some places. So what you need is you need to let markets do what they're good at, which is also involves regulations and so on, and then have the society and politics take care of what it's not good at. You can have those balanced out. In the most successful countries often cited in balancing between markets and society are the Scandinavian countries, not just Norway, which has immense oil wealth, but Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands to a degree, Finland. All those countries tend to balance out between having market incentives and market rewards, and also having political compromise, consensus, and social support, right? So Denmark is famous for this, by the way, for having a very small welfare support for workers. Well, it's not the way to say it. Denmark, it's very easy to fire somebody in Denmark if they're a worker, right? You're in some business, there's a problem, you fire your workers. Now the guy has no job. Now theoretically, no job, still has to eat, still has to pay the bills or whatever, and the government then has a program called, we will support you with income, but more importantly, we will retrain you and get you in another job, right? So employers fire people all the time. The government helps the employees figure out what they're going to do next, and the employees get back to work. You're not going to die in Denmark, but no one's going to sit there and pay you to live at home and watch TV either, right? This is the failure of the welfare state. So they have a good safety net, that's the expression, that keeps people from being in trouble. Denmark's a very wealthy country, but they also keeps them very productive because they push them back into work very quickly. Same as the other countries, Germany and the Netherlands as well, right? So other countries are not so good at balancing between markets and society as we've seen in these last 10 years, but you'll see over and over again. So that's just that comment from the homework. Now that also gives us a great lead into markets, missing markets, and non-markets. Right? Market. We can have a market for oil, a missing market for carbon, and a non-market for love. These are just examples. The point of this continuum here is that some things are best handled in a market and some things are not handled in a market. Some things we wish we could have a market for. CO2, it would be great if we had a market for carbon, right? Or a carbon tax that functioned. There are various not so functioning versions of that. We would like to have it functioning because then what would happen is that CO2 would be in the market and we would have a price signal, which would be awesome. It would help people use the correct amount of carbon as far as the Earth's atmosphere, the global commons, is concerned. But we don't have that for CO2 in a fundamentally good way, and so what we end up having is a bunch of confusion about what to do. We have regulations about your car should get so many miles per gallon. We have subsidies towards solar panels. We have people who are chaining themselves to various things to try and save the Earth. We've got forests that are being cut down by Malaysian billionaires because they want to put another hydropower plant up and they're going to get carbon credits from the World Bank, whatever. All kinds of crazy stuff happens over here. I spend most of my time on this stuff because this is boring because it works all the time, or it works mostly. And this is really personal. It's not just that it's love, but it's hard to get a hold of. And it's not something you would manage anyway. You don't manage love in any kind of centralized sense. It's a very decentralized phenomena. When we have a market that's working, we've got price, we have supply equals demand, where marginal utility on the demand is equal to marginal cost on the supply curve. That's efficient, but then we have to worry, well, wait a second. What if this is the market for oil and supply and demand are balanced? Is that working out okay? Is there going to be a problem with that? Tell me. Supply and demand for oil. Traditionally, we've talked about in this class, what's the problem with supply and demand? Is it the correct amount of oil being consumed on the planet right now?
Well, the demand for oil is not limited?
It is limited in a way by the price. There's a supply. Are we selling and consuming? Are we consuming too much oil on the earth right now as far as most people are concerned? Yes or no? Why? Why are we consuming too much oil? There's lots of answers.
Price doesn't accurately reflect the cost.
What are the costs that are missing from the price of oil that he just mentioned? And the sweater back there. What's missing from the cost of oil? No, you. Sorry? No, the question I asked is, what is missing from the price of oil? Carbon, right. Or pollution, generally speaking. There's two things that are more or less missing. Here's carbon here, and pollution. And the way you can draw that is fairly simple, and you'll be able to use this more often in your classes as well as this class. If this is the supply curve for oil worldwide, and here's demand, right? If we're missing some part of the cost, as in it is a cost, a negative externality, then the supply curve should be higher or lower? Higher, right? You can do it lots of ways. I'll just do it this way. This is representing the additional cost of burning oil, right? That's the cost of local pollution, the cost of global pollution, anything you want to call it. The cost of, in some ways, too many cars crowding downtown Vancouver, but that's a different thing. Literally, you can say this is a supply curve. If you had this supply curve, then the quantity we're consuming would fall, and the price would be higher. The market price is too low compared to the higher price. That's just the basics of a negative externality for a resource which has an environmental impact, which is our entire class. This graph is more or less our whole class, right? But let me just ask as a clarification, what happens when you, in general, when you learn Economics 1, what happens when you have a tax on something? What happens when you have a tax? Is more or less of the item consumed? Less, right? There is a consumer surplus and a producer surplus, and then when you add the tax, do those surpluses rise or fall? And what is the difference in surplus? What's that called? It's a little triangle. Deadweight loss, right? Okay, good. So here's going to be an interesting point that it turns out is not made very clear to students sometimes. If I have a tax on coffee, or actually, well, I could have a tax on labor, right? I could have a tax on your wages, income taxes. But I'll make it simple. Let's just say it's a tax on coffee. Here's the tax revenue. This goes to the government, and hopefully they'll spend it to make all of us better off. Sometimes they won't. And we know that the quantity shifts in, and we have this triangle called deadweight loss. This is a very conventional explanation of what happens with taxes, right? It could be a tax on coffee. It could be a tax on income. Now, wait a second. Coffee. Is there a social reason to tax coffee? Does somebody lose? If I drink my coffee, who's a loser? Does somebody lose? Is there a negative externality from drinking coffee? I talk too fast, maybe? No, there is really no negative externality, right? So it really is a deadweight loss in terms of the coffee drinkers could be better off if there wasn't a tax there. Food is not taxed in many countries for this reason, by the way. Why would the government make money off of you trying to eat, right? But meals in restaurants are taxed because, hey, you've got enough money to go to a restaurant, you might as well give us some. But then what's the difference between this deadweight loss and this corrected supply curve, which I can get to if I put a tax of this much? If I put a tax that is exactly equal to the negative externality, would I not be getting a new supply curve that sets the correct price for the amount of oil consumed? Would there be a deadweight loss? If I drew the graph differently for oil, and I said, look, here's demand for oil, here's supply, and I'm going to put a tax on oil, and now consumption goes from here to here, is there a deadweight loss? There's a triangle there. There is a triangle. We know that triangles are very important in economics, almost as important as x's. But is it a deadweight loss? Yes or no? Deadweight loss, yes or no? Confusion. Remember the definition. This is what I want you to think about. Remember the definition. If I put a tax on coffee, I reduce the amount of coffee consumed, but I have no impact on positive or negative externalities from coffee. Coffee, we're assuming right now, is just a regular good that has no negative impacts.
I guess it's a loss to the producer.
That's okay. Oh, sorry, but that's not okay. It's coffee, right? The loss to the producer, are you talking about oil or coffee?
Oil.
Well, let's stick with coffee for a second. Coffee, the deadweight loss is to both consumers and producers. The tax revenue takes money out of the pocket of the producer and out of the consumer. In this circumstance, it's identical in terms of money out of the pocket, the way I've drawn these curves, the way the money out of the pocket of the consumer and the producer, because there's that tax wedge. But what about the triangles? The press is the question. What is up with that? Are we consuming the correct amount of oil without the tax? Yes or no? Yes, we are consuming the correct amount. Who says yes, we're consuming the correct amount without the tax? Who says no? No. Okay, so we're consuming already too much, and now we're consuming less, which is correct. So where's the loss? Is there a loss? We've lost the negative externality, in a sense. So now we have no negative externality. So we actually have nothing. It's like a gain, but it's really, we have no negative externality.
Sort of assumes that you can price a carbon emission in the absence of a market and actually have the correct level.
Absolutely true. We're assuming that we can set the price at the right spot. Okay. But in principle, we're setting it in the right spot. Setting taxes in the right spot is a very difficult phenomena, right? Most of the time, it's not easy. But the fact is this, is that the tax on an activity that produces a negative externality doesn't create a deadweight loss. It corrects the missing market. It corrects the problem.
But it's going to be unfair because some individuals, they would want to pump to get, but they wouldn't be able to get it because they have some transactions that are not happening.
Correct.
But some people get it, some people don't.
Correct. So it's now use the word unfair, which is a very important word. If I am shooting bullets randomly around the room and I hit you with a bullet and you get hit by the bullet, then I might be having a good time, but you're injured, right? And if the government says, hey, I'm going to put a tax on bullets so you don't shoot as many people, then I'll say, hey, that's unfair. I used to shoot bullets all over the place. I used to drive my car all over the place. And now it's unfair that you're taxing my car driving habit, which, by the way, produces a negative externality. Bullets, you see the joke, bullets are causing harm the way driving a car can cause harm. So if the government says you're shooting too many bullets, it's the same as saying you're driving too much. The negative externality is there. The idea of a government intervention is that there is a price of the activity that the consumer is not internalizing. That's why it's called a negative externality. That's why we want to put the tax on. And so what happens is the tax goes on, everybody looks at their gas price and say, holy cow, gas is more expensive. Right? Now we know in Venezuela it costs half a penny a liter. What is it? A quarter penny? It's like 4 liters for a penny. That's a penny. One Canadian they don't have pennies anymore. So for 5 cents you can get 20 liters of fuel in Venezuela. Unfortunately, then you have to live in Venezuela. But if you go to Turkey, which is a country that has a very high price, it's about 3 Canadian dollars a liter for fuel, right? Or you can go to Japan, or you can go to France, or you can go to Canada, or you go between BC and Alberta. We had this question in this class at the start, right? The gas prices in Alberta are 20 cents per liter lower than BC. It's not because Alberta has this high technology oil refinery and they can't get it across the road, across the border. It's because the government, the provincial government, has a different tax. They're already trying to set the tax at the correct level, let's say, right, based on politics and so on. But the idea is that, hey, British Columbia people, don't drive your cars so much. Yeah.
Just a question. I understand the point that's being made that by putting on the tax, you then can counteract this negative externality. But just looking at the graph in the oil market, putting the tax, doesn't that result in a reduced consumer surplus just by the...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. So, number one, we have the deadweight loss, which is not a deadweight loss, which is correcting the negative externality. But number two, the tax is still taking money from both sides, the consumers and producers. Right? So here's the thing that's interesting. When you have an environmental tax on a negative externality, it's going to generate revenue. Right? It's also going to reduce the harmful behavior. So you put a tax on cigarettes, a tax on alcohol, a tax on oil, or other goods that are taxed for their negative impacts, so-called sin taxes. And those taxes, conveniently for the government, generate revenue, right? But they don't. But they also reduce the harmful activity. I think did I talk about what's the tobacco company of China? The government runs the tobacco monopoly in China. Did I talk about that in this class or the other class? It's an irony to me that the Chinese government has no incentive to reduce tobacco consumption because the Chinese government is selling cigarettes. And if you went to any health activist, you would say, cigarettes kill people. They kill you, number one. But they kill people next to you, number two. We should tax cigarettes. And the authority, the body with the authority to tax cigarettes is the government. But the government's selling cigarettes. If they put a tax on cigarettes, they'll make money on taxes, but they'll lose revenue on lower sales. It's a big problem. But in some ways, I guess that will be the transition. If the Chinese government ever decides to move to lower consumption of tobacco, it'll be through a tax that it also takes. So in fact, the government shouldn't care. Either they sell you the cigarettes, they make money, or they tax the cigarettes, they make money. It's a great deal, right? So those negative externalities are going to get taxed for their negative impact, but they're also going to generate revenue. You have to keep in mind that the point is to correct the behavior. The generation of revenue is not the point with a tax on a negative externality. A tax on income, or a tax on property, a tax on consumption, the excise taxes, those are meant to raise revenue. They also, by accident, reduce the activity. What the government wants is that they tax your income and you don't change your behavior at all. You work just as hard. They want to tax your purchases at the stores, and they don't want you to reduce your behavior at all because they want to have a perfect tax collection. What does that look like? Just so you remember, I'm talking about elasticity of demand, right? If you have a very steep demand curve, and here's the supply curve, so here's the market price. If I put a tax on there that's this big, then all of this is tax revenue to the government, and the change in consumption is very small. Governments love to tax demands which are very inelastic. The problem, of course, just to get at the punchline, you know, our demand for example, water is very inelastic. You know, toilet, showers, washing, drinking. We don't really think very much about the price of water when we do those things. So if the government would tax water, it would make a huge amount of money. But politically, that's suicide because people don't like the idea of paying more for the necessities of life. So they don't tax water, they tax Rolex watches or something like that, right? It's like, or boats, right? If you have a yacht, you have to pay a tax. Of course you could pay a tax for a yacht because politically it's not falling on the regular people, it's falling on the rich people. That's the politics compared to the economics. They don't always agree with each other. This is also a very important point. When you talk about taxing gasoline or oil, the first response is, what about the poor people who need to drive around, right? Yes, they're going to have to pay higher taxes, but it turns out that most of the time the burden of the taxes are going to fall on the rich people, including for oil. Because rich people fly in airplanes, and rich people have limousines, and rich people take taxis, and poor people, they ride bicycles, they walk, they take the bus, they don't fly in planes, right? So if you tax energy, you would tax the rich by far. And we know this because you look at Canada, where per capita energy consumption is like double most countries, especially developing countries, and obviously taxing energy would be reduce. Canadians are using a lot of energy, and if you would tax it, they would pay a lot. But Canadians are rich compared to people in the poorer countries, right? But it's not like you're taxing Canadians to help, Malaysians or something like, or Malaysians, yeah, Malaysians, something like that. So this is the debate about taxes that comes up when we're talking about political economy. What should you put a tax on versus what's politically acceptable? There are other ways. So taxes are one way of correcting a negative externality. You are reading the Ostrom paper, the Dietz paper, as well as the Coase paper, which are about other non-tax ways of correcting the negative externalities, which I think you talk about in the homework. If not, we'll talk about it in class. No, but we'll talk about that also in class after, probably on Thursday. Okay, so there's different ways of getting to the correct supply and demand is all I'm getting at. There's taxes, there's regulations, there's price ceilings or price floors. If you didn't want to tax, say that the government didn't want to tax cars because there was a lobby against taxing cars, but they also want to limit the number of cars. Because you can use taxes, if you put taxes on cars are like, they're more like over here. Cars have a negative externality. We could put a tax on cars. People say, don't tax cars. The government says, okay, we're not going to tax cars. The government will have no impact on the price of cars. However, you have to have a permit to have a car. But we will sell you the permit. Or even worse, we'll have a lottery for the permit. Random people. You'll get a permit, you won't get a permit, you'll get a permit. We'll have a lottery for the permit. Or, if you wait in line outside the ministry on Monday morning, we'll give out permits to the first 10 people in line. There's other ways of taxing cars or oil or anything else that are not price related. It's a quota, where you put a limit on the number of cars or so on, and the government says, oh, we're not making any money. We sell the car ownership certificate for $1, but only to the first 10 people. And they wait in line in the morning on Monday morning. And what's going to happen? So first thing is happening, they wait in line. They're not spending money, they're spending what? Time. The second thing that's going to happen is the person who has the lowest cost of time in terms of waiting in line is not necessarily the person who wants to buy the car, right? So what do they do with the license once they have it in their hand? I'm asking you. Because you were dreaming about cars and licenses. Now you have a license for a car, right? And you just waited all morning in line, you got it. And then you want the car more than she does in terms of, man, I want a car badly. So what do you guys do in terms of negotiation? Huh? Trade. What do you give her? Money. Money for your permit, right? So you wait in line. Hey, this is where I don't even have a car. If I had one, la la la, and the guy's like, I'll give you $1,000 for that piece of paper. Done, right? Now the government says we don't set any price on car ownership, but quickly, very quickly, there is a shadow price. There's a black market price, right, for ownership. That's what happens all the time, and the government says, oh, we're not affecting the price. So you will pay or you will pay. The problem sometimes is that the government is supposed to set it at the correct price. You said it yourself. What's the correct tax? What happened in the U.S. is instructive right now. There has been a big move for hybrid cars or electric cars because people want to have low emissions. They want to save the planet and carbon and so on. And the governments of at least 2 states that I know have now started putting a tax on these virtuous cars, on a Prius or a Leaf or whatever, right? So the government of, I think Washington State actually, is putting a tax that they do not have on on gas-powered cars on electric-powered cars. Now that's really strange. I thought electric-powered cars are a really good idea. Why would we tax a virtuous thing? That's like you have to pay a tax to get into this classroom to learn. On top, it's like too much learning. We want to tax that, right? Which is actually, some governments do have that policy. But why would the government tax electric cars?
The battery that you dispose of?
Almost no. It's not the negative externality of the battery. Yeah. Almost. It's not the gas, but
Where the electricity comes
no, not the electricity comes from either.
from. Coal-powered economies too.
That could be true, but the electricity price could be correct, right? Could be a solar-powered, car charger. But the problem is that the people who drive electric cars don't buy as much gas. And the government makes tax money off of gas. And the tax money, it wants. And if you're not getting tax money from gas, you're going to get tax money some other way. And you've got a hybrid car, we're taxing you for that too. Right? So in some ways, you have this kind of crazy situation where you're saying, we're not taxing gas enough because it has a negative externality, but we're going to tax, whatever that is, some other thing. We're going to tax cars that are supposed to solve the problem because actually we don't care about the negative externality, we care about the revenue. This is a useful thing to keep in mind when we think about, does the government do one thing or another? What is it trying to do? Is it trying to raise revenue because, by the way, we need to pay salaries and my cousin is really not working but he needs the money? Right? My cousin works for the ministry. Or is the government trying to tax something which creates a negative externality and harms students? Or is there something else? Right? It's not, a tax is not a tax is not a tax. There are various different ways of interpreting them. No tax doesn't mean no price. Remember with the quota. So that's how we have to kind of be flexible about thinking about what the government is, how it's interacting with the market. The government, of course, may be encouraged by auto manufacturers and oil vendors to tax hybrid cars. That is also very possible, right? Because those guys, they're losing market share, and they don't want to lose their business. There's a problem in the water business where people use, if in the water business, the problem with what I just said, taxing consumption, people don't like that. In the water business, this is money here. A lot of, on the cost side for a water utility, most of the costs are fixed. The pipes and the generators and the pumps and so on. They have a variable cost which is very low, which is the cost of getting water to you. The variable cost depends on what? If you're selling water, what cost of water depend on? I built a pipe network. There's a pipe and it comes to your house. But there's no water in the pipe. And now you turn on the tap and water starts to come out. What cost comes from that for the water utility? Labor, maybe, yeah. There's a guy at the other end, he's throwing buckets of water in the pipes. What else is the cost? That's actually, I'll go with that. We're going to transform labor into energy, right? There's the cost of pumping. That's a variable cost, right? Chemicals and so on, yeah. Depletion of the resource, not usually included in the cost, but it should be, so that's correct. That would be a resource cost here, right? But this is a variable cost. The thing is that most water utilities have variable revenue and fixed revenue in this kind of proportion. Most of the time, you pay for your water by volume, by consumption, if you have a meter, which is happening in parts of Canada, right? Not in BC. Well, we're still talking about it. But in places where there is a meter, and by the way, in California, which is in the worst drought in 500 years, some parts of California don't have meters on any houses either, right? So in British Columbia, I think this is permissible relative to California. But, whatever. It'll happen in BC eventually. So if you pay per unit of water consumed, the utility gets a lot of revenue from you, right? And they get a little bit of revenue no matter what, fixed per month. right? Think about this in terms of your cell phones or whatever. You pay $50 a month, you get, whatever, a certain number of minutes, and after that you have to pay more. So the utility has this going on. Now here's the problem with this virtue. I was bringing this up because of the virtue problem of people using less gasoline. What if they use less water? Oh, let's cut our water consumption in half. We're going to be very efficient. We're going to take short showers. We're not going to water the lawn. We cut our water consumption in half. And the utility costs fall by the X a little bit, but the utility revenues fall by more or less? More, a lot more. So now the utility is freaking out. We're not making enough money to cover our costs. Stop conserving water, California people, even though you're in a drought. So you have a problem, right? It's a mixed message. It's the same thing as we're going to tax the hybrid car. Use a lot of water, but not too much. We're in a drought, but we need money, right? Now, of course, the way to correct this is to match these things up here, right? You want to have fixed costs or fixed revenue and variable revenue, right? That's how you correct it in the water thing. I'm writing this book about this right now, so I talk about this all the time. But you want to find a way of fixing the problem. So the government's incentives are the same as your incentives as a consumer. That, of course, is the big goal. And remember, some people don't want those incentives to be aligned because they are benefiting from the current situation, right? This is the special interest group. This is the winners and losers. This is the benefits and cost distribution that I brought up many, many times, but this is the message of this class. And I'm giving you more examples because not just in here, but out there, you will see this in action. Okay, 10 minutes. As an example, I have dozens of examples written here. I'm just not going to go through all of them. Dozens is too much, but I can talk. So maybe that's better. I'll give you two examples. One example is when the Great Recession started, the word for this financial crisis started a couple years ago. U.S. auto manufacturers, which were already in bad shape, they went into losses. They started losing money because people said, "Oh my God, we're having a financial problem. I lost my job. I don't think I want to buy a new car. Actually, I don't think I want to spend $20,000 or $30,000 for a new car when I have an old car that, by the way, old is 3 years old." And the government said, "Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll have a win-win. What we'll do is the government said, we'll do cash for clunkers. If you bring in your old car, which is a polluting car, and you buy a new car, which is a clean car in terms of pollution or gas mileage or whatever, we will give you $3,000, says the U.S. government. Of course, it's not the government money, it's the tax money. It's all everybody's tax money. So what happened is a bunch of people said, yeah, $3,000 discount, that's all right. I'll buy a $15,000 car or whatever. I'll save money. So let's look at this. What happens? First of all, we've got demand for cars. Then we have, let's just call it supply. $3,000 subsidy. The supply curve moves in or out? Up or down? Out, up or down? Down, over. Around, right? You get a subsidy. And the subsidy, remember, is just a negative tax, right? So what happens is, I've got this equilibrium. What am I doing here? Well, anyway, this is the subsidy here, and the quantity of cars sold goes out, which is exactly what they wanted to do. We want to sell cars. And they said, and we're going to get your old car, and we're going to put it in the landfill, and we're going to make it into metal. In fact, we're going to send it back to China, where it'll be recycled into some TV sets or whatever. Or not TV sets, those are from Mexico. So the government succeeded in its goal of selling cars, and they said, oh, now the total pollution emissions are going to be lower because the average car has fallen. The average emissions has fallen. The problem is that if you look at sales month by month for cars in the US, what happened is they had sales going like this, and then sales went up like this because the cash for clunkers, and then they went down like this. And then they went like this. So the government caused those sales to go from the future to the present at a cost of $3,000 a car, but zero actual impact on ownership of cars, because they just changed the trend temporarily. So if I tell you, it's January right now, if I tell you, if you buy a box of cereal in January, I will give you $2 off that box of cereal. You'll be like, hell yeah, I buy a box of cereal. I eat cereal all the time anyway. I'll buy a box of cereal extra, or 14 boxes of cereal in January, and in February I won't buy any cereal. So that's what happened. People bought cars they were going to buy anyway now. And what happened is, and this gets worse, right? So number one, they spent a lot of money to get people to do what they were going to do anyway. Number two is that the emissions of the cars didn't necessarily change, because when you take a car which is 3 years old and by law you have to destroy the car, you're taking something which is full of resources. It takes a lot of energy to make steel and aluminum and plastic and engines and so on. And that should, if you want to use it efficiently, you want to use it to the end of its life. So the car can last for 20 years or 30 years. The government basically said, take a whole, it's like ordering lunch. You take one bite off the plate and throw the plate away. Right? You haven't finished eating lunch yet, but the government says, throw the plate away. So the resources that went into destroying all the extra cars was an extra cost that would not have happened without this incentive, because the government said you can only bring in these kinds of cars to qualify for this program. So they had to destroy the car, because usually what you would do if you sell a car, if you're buying a new car, what do you do with your old car? Do you throw it in the ocean? Do you melt it down in your backyard? You sell it to somebody, right? But you're not allowed to sell it for cash for clunkers. I don't know the exact details, but this was a problem, right? So what happened is they brought forward sales at a high cost of $3,000 a car that were going to happen anyway. Then they destroyed a bunch of resources, which were cars. Then the car companies all went bankrupt, or 2 or 3 of them went bankrupt anyway, right? Didn't help. And they lost jobs and so on. So this was just like a massive intervention that was meant to help, and it didn't help anybody. The only people it really helped were nobody really. I mean, it helped the wrecking yards that got lots of cars for cheap, and helped the metal recyclers, because they got a lot of supply of nice quality stuff. But that's like, they must have wasted about $100 for every dollar of benefit from that program. But the car companies lobbied for it because they wanted to sell more cars. They don't like old cars, they like new cars, because they're selling those cars. So that's an example of the government just screwing up big time. And that brings up, I'm going to bring up this thing. Did I talk about life cycle analysis? It wasn't this class. I did? Did I talk about the car, from the cradle to grave of a car? No? All right. Here's why I'm going to bring this up, because people talk about it all the time, and it's a resource environmental problem. Keep this cash for clunkers thing in mind. People are saying, you know what you should do? You should sell. I had a BMW a couple years ago. I like BMWs. They're amazing cars. I had a 1998 BMW. A fancy brand old car. My car before that was 1987, so I moved up. A 323, okay? I had this car, and this was, I was teaching this class in 2009, and people said, oh, you should buy a Prius of 2009 vintage, let's say. Because when you drive a Prius, you use less fuel than when you drive a BMW, which is probably true. So say that on a Prius, I'm getting 4 liters per 100 kilometers, and a BMW, I'm doing 7 liters per 100 kilometers. Okay, now you know one set of facts about the Prius versus the BMW. If you're doing your cost-benefit analysis Is that all you need to know from a social perspective about the costs and benefits of these two different cars? Which one or which? What else do you need to know? I'm asking you. No, you. Yeah, you. Okay, the cost of a new car. Let's say that a new Prius costs $30,000. Let's say that an old BMW costs $5,000. Let's just assume that the cost represents the resources that go into the car. That's a big assumption, but let's assume that. So now, I've got $25,000 difference. You could say the difference is $25,000. I don't care which one you put it in. So now I'm getting better gas mileage, but I'm paying a much bigger cost. What's another thing I need to know to compare these cars to find out if which one is better? Not you. Which one is better? What else do I need to know? Why don't you tell me what else I need to know? What else matters in terms of the decision as a consumer or as a member of society? Sorry? Car speed? Is that what you said? Car speed, almost. Car speed is almost the answer. What is it? The what? How long you're going to drive the car? In terms of what? Durability, that's one answer. I don't want that one exactly. I want a different answer that's to do with how long you drive the car. No, that's what we're doing later on. Okay, you guys. You over there. I'm asking, no, not you, the girl in the front. What are you? You, What else do I need to know? Almost. The girl next to you. Don't know. Keep going. What? You're not sure about cars? Bicycles? If you buy, let me ask you, I'm going to do a very girl-centric question. If you're wearing high heels and you want to go walking, do you want to walk very far? Do you want to walk 5 kilometers in high heels? So what is going on with the cars that matters in terms of doing the cost-benefit? Huh? Kilometers. How many kilometers are you going to go? If I park my $30,000 Prius in the driveway next to my $5,000 BMW and nothing happens, I'm still $25,000, difference between the two. If I drive that Prius 40,000 kilometers a year, now we're starting to get into some interesting stuff, right? But it's not just this. This is not the whole story. When you're doing life cycle analysis, which is what other people said about depreciation in life, you have to look at how much it costs when you buy it, using it, and then when you throw it away, right? The life cycle from start to finish. And that's how you understand costs and benefits. That's how you do the net present value. Okay? End of class. Thank you very much. See you on Thursday.